What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another collection update for you. Part 2 of the Florida run. Yeah, I'm still in Florida here and still have yet to get to Denver because, once again, I got a lot of shit in Florida. So once again, these trips are generally kind of unique because I look for stuff to patch up holes in the collection, and I'm more than willing to get some stuff that is, you know, a little bit more non-metal because I like that stuff too. But trust me, there's a ton of metal in here as well, but definitely some non-metal surprises. So once again, we have a large stack here, a lot of double dips in terms of the same bands, in terms of multiple releases. And yeah, this is another big one, so let's get it started. Edge of Sanity, Crimson 2. This is the 8th and final album from this legendary death metal, melodic death metal, I mean, almost bordering on progressive death metal act. Dan Swano, fucking legend in Swedish metal in general. This was, you know, one of his main projects from the 90s all the way to 2003, or maybe a little bit after when they broke up, or when he broke up. This was essentially just him doing this. And I have Crimson 1. I love it. It is one 40-minute track of just amazing riffs and melodies and very lavish songwriting, and this is a great companion piece to it. So probably the biggest difference between the two here is the fact that the first one was one 40-minute track. This one is 44 tracks ranging from 30 seconds to a minute and a half to like 2 minutes, which is kind of annoying. Like, you look at it, it's tracked like a grindcore album, but it's not grind. It is one continuous song, and it is absolutely amazing. I do find it a little annoying that it is tracked the way it is because I just want to be able to pull like single tracks, but you know, I'm pretty much forced to listen to this on its own because in terms of the track breaks, yeah, they did the best they could, but sometimes they are a little bit jarring. But for the most part, they flow into one another well. Again, this is still very much a continuous song, and I mean, Dan Swano is an amazing musician, songwriter, producer, vocalist. He's probably a fucking good cook too. I mean, yeah, he probably does everything well because literally everything that I have that has his name attached to it is awesome, and once again, it includes another Edge of Sanity album. Now, all these tracks are broken up into movements, in fact 9 of them. Honestly, I really wish this was just 9 tracks that were like a little bit longer and just, you know, those are the movements. But they do a really good job of like blending all of the different stuff that he gets into. Like, there's clean passages of like clean guitars, clean vocals. There's some outright heavy moments on the incantation section, which is Act 2 on here, which is weird. It says it's actually 43 minutes, but honestly, I think on my computer it said it tracked a bit longer than that. Not that I'm really complaining, that just means I got more Edge of Sanity, but this is absolutely amazing, much like the first Crimson one. My only issues are with the tracking. I think, again, the songwriting dynamics as this song progresses in terms of the movements and changes, like, you get to hear pretty much almost every side of Dan Swano in terms of his amazing songwriting. The riffs are tight, whether he's going full bore death metal, there's some doom metal sections on here. Again, more clean playing, some lush synths that are included and add a lot to the music. It's all awesome. I just wish they didn't break it up into, again, 44 tracks in here. That is the only thing that I don't like. Everything else is absolutely awesome. If you've never checked out Edge of Sanity, honestly, I just say get all their albums if you can find them. They're really fucking good. This one, from what I hear, is a little hard to find, but I guess I got lucky when I was hunting in the record stores down there. But yeah, absolutely killer stuff. Go get you some Edge of Sanity. Amazing Swedish death metal / melodic death metal. It's Dan Swano. Dan Swano's name is on it. Go get it. That's pretty much it there. Check it out. Embalmer, 13 Faces of Death. This is the first full length from this Cleveland death metal act. Came out in 2006. Now, the history of this band is kind of interesting because this band actually formed in 1990, and pretty much like breakups and reformations kind of kept them from actually getting anything out past like the demo stage. They did have one EP that came out in 95, but it took them till 2006 to come out with their first full length, and this is just filthy, brutal, old school death metal. Now, I know that currently this band is actually fronted by the frontman of Carnugia, which is another awesome Cleveland death metal act you should check out. And they have a really cool old school death metal sound as well. But this is more akin to like early Cannibal Corpse and Autopsy, especially Autopsy, because they have songs that absolutely fly, and then they kind of sink into these nasty death doom breakdowns, especially on They Can Smell Your Blood, Horrific Disdain, and Vengeance Through Homicide. Yeah, the song titles are lavishly over-the-top brutality. There's a clear love for horror movies here, especially on songs like Beheaded Without a Drop Spilt. That one actually includes a really cool sample from The Exorcist 3, which I think is an absolutely underrated flick. It's the whole part where the Gemini killer is explaining how he beheaded someone without spilling a drop of blood and put it all in jars. And Brad Dourif's performance in that is absolutely fucking amazing. Like, if you have a chance, watch that movie. But yeah, that sample's in there, and it definitely sets the pace well. And, you know, atmosphere in terms of this style of music is always fun because it's just cool seeing what horror movies they actually pull and how they tie into the songs themselves. Now, that being said, they kind of go a little bit overboard. Like, the opening track, while it is 5 minutes long, 2 minutes and 30 seconds of it is a long horror movie sample that they put in there. So sometimes it's a bit much. And while this has like really raw production, I feel like sometimes it's a little too loose. Like, sometimes the vocals are a little bit off the beat, which is kind of cool. Like, it gives it a bit of a live, you know, sort of charm to it. But at a certain point, like, it was kind of like grating on me. I was like, no, get back on it. You're driving me nuts. It does delve into like some slightly more technical riffing, like more like technical brutal death metal, like, you know, Broken Hope or like Gorgasm. But for the most part, like, this stays pretty raw. Like, when it comes into blast beats, it's more of that thrashy style of blast beat. And it actually has gang vocals, but they're like gang growls, which I think is really cool. It kind of adds like a punky flair to it. Now, they did re-record some demos on here, and those are really solid too. Pretty much this is just gritty, dirty, gross fun. You know, the same reason you would jam a Cannibal Corpse album or an Autopsy album, you would probably jam this too. So yeah, if you like that sort of gross fun, a little bit more brutal, old school death metal, definitely check this out. Check out their other albums too. I think they only have one other full length, but they have lots of splits and I think some comps in there too. Yeah, Embalmer, nasty stuff from Cleveland. Check it out. Aramet, Desert of Ghouls. This is the first EP from this German death doom / sludge band. At least that's what they were listed as. Honestly, listening to this sounds more like stoner doom with like sludge metal vocals, because man, this band is fuzzy and fucking doomy as hell, and I really dig this EP. This is only 2 tracks, but it's 21 minutes. Pretty much a good sign that I'm about to get doomed, and yeah, it's awesome. Both tracks, Beheading the Innumerous, that sounds like a daunting job, and City of Kash-il-Num? Sure, that's what it says. Yeah, both of these songs are absolutely killer. The first track is definitely more bleak, doomy, like kind of sets the tone with this immediately fuzzy bass. I thought it was the bass and the guitar going on at the same time, but I think it was the isolated bass that opens this up, and it is the fuzziest thing. And it doesn't scream like sludge where it's like kind of gross and kind of like thick and gnarly sounding. This feels way more like warm and fuzzy, kind of in the vein of like Monolord or Truck Fighters. You know, definitely more of like a stoner doom vibe, but when the vocals kick in, they're notably more harsh and shrieky, you know, bit of reverb on them. The whole album just sounds awash in fuzz and sort of murk, and it's done really well. Like, honestly, I really like the production on here. The first track is a really cool build up too. Like, once you get that bass line kind of set up, like you get these cool, like seemingly randomized drum fills to sort of like, you know, usher the song along. The guitar starts coming in, and honestly, the bass kind of drives this album. It kind of overpowers the guitars in a lot of, you know, sections on here, but especially on this first track. The second track, honestly, I can't see why this band isn't considered stoner doom on this one, because you have this really trippy kind of like Caius-like vibe to it. Like, you get more clean guitars, they're playing more psychedelic melodies, the bass is, again, sort of rumbling in the background, again, loaded with fuzz, the drums are slow and groovy. It builds up towards the end and gets a little bit faster and aggressive, but the whole vibe of that song is way more of a stoner doom song. There's even some phaser effects on the guitars too, which that's, you know, kind of a big stoner doom thing. And hell, like, this song is, I want to say, like 12 minutes, and it pretty much relies solely on like the bass and drums sort of building it up for like the first 5 minutes. But when the song explodes, like, it's just layers and layers of just killer stoner doom shit. Yeah, this is absolutely killer and totally not what I expected. Again, more like stoner doom warmth. Like, I got more sleep vibes than I got like Crowbar or like Acid Bath or any other sludge band that I could really think of. This is just really solid. Yeah, I would say if you dig, again, Monolord, Truck Fighters, maybe Thou, like, especially in terms of the vocals, they are a little bit more screechy and kind of like staticky sounding, but musically, I would say this is closer to Stoner Doom. Like, it definitely has some sludge metal moments, but I really don't hear a lot of like big death metal moments on here. Not really complaining because both the tracks in here are absolutely awesome. So yeah, if you just like Stoner Doom and sludgy atmospheric shit, definitely check this out. Escotrilihum, Mystic Echo from a Funeral Dimension. This is the debut album from this French one-man black metal act. This is not bedroom black metal. This is some really wild, atmospheric, very lavish one-man black metal, and honestly one of my favorite finds that I found down in Florida, because I need to get more of this band's stuff because everything I've heard from them is awesome. And I only have one other album, which is like Pandemorphium or something like that. I don't know, it came in like a big DVD case, which is kind of obnoxious in terms of storing it, but I really enjoyed that album, and I've heard their most recent two were absolutely amazing, but I haven't gotten around to them. And I should probably catch up to it because since 2017, this dude has released 10 full-length albums. This is a very busy dude, but I suppose when you're a one-man act, you can probably just keep churning out stuff. I don't think he tours ever. I could be wrong there, but I know this guy makes some insanely just lavish, intricate, very dynamic black metal. It's cold, lots of like just, you know, amazing tremolo riffs and great soaring melodies. Like, there's a lot of melody in here, but there's also a lot of like flat out heaviness, especially on Blito. I have no idea how to say that. Black Collapse. That's what it says in parentheses. We're gonna go with that. There's a bit more like death metal riffing on there, even on Shatalasoth. My God, that is a totally made up word. But there's some more like death metal intensity, like some more like chuggy machine gun riffs mixed with the very lavish melodies. There's sweeping synths all over this album and lots of wild vocal effects, which all add to the creepy, kind of inhuman atmosphere. Like, the album kind of starts to like unravel a bit, like not musically, but vocally. Like, all the vocal effects really start coming in layers, and it kind of adds this sort of like spiraling into insanity sort of feel to the album. A lot of the songs in here are really long, so you kind of have to be patient with them because there are long, stretched out movements, but honestly, I really enjoyed that because the continuous build of these movements and like moving into like other sections, the transitions are really well done, especially on following the mystical light of the Shadow Forest, quote unquote, final path to death. That is an entire sentence. But there's a lot of cool, like, clean, atmospheric playing in between all of the blackened tropes. And for a drum machine program, I'm reasonably sure it's a drum machine. It actually sounds pretty good on here. Now, this is notably more raw than the other albums that I have heard. Like, I wouldn't say he cleaned up his production, but he kind of polished it. Like, I wouldn't say, like, everything else is, like, polished that he's done. Like, it's still very raw, but, like, this is notably a little bit more uneven, especially when it comes down to like drum production here. Like, sometimes the drums come in really loud and sometimes they're really muffled in the background. It might be something to, you know, change the dynamic of the song. Like, it might be on purpose. I don't know, like, it sounds like, you know, just something wasn't turned up. But overall, this was an absolutely killer listen. A very moody piece. Like, it can shift from like very reflective, sorrowful moments to outright aggression. I mean, one of my favorites on here was Infernus Spiritus. It's an absolute banger of a song. I think it's like, God, maybe 9-10 minutes. I can't remember the song lengths on here, but there are a lot that are over the 10-minute mark. But again, well written, well paced. Really enjoyed this. Strongly recommend this band in general. Again, everything I've heard in terms of their more recent stuff has been fucking lights out. So again, I need to catch up on that stuff. But it was really cool finding their first album, and it was really cool to see them actually put it in a normal jewel case versus like the big DVD cases. Those are cool, but again, like storing them, I don't know, it's a little irritating sometimes. But yeah, if you've never checked out this band, I recommend checking out pretty much everything they put out. I haven't heard anything from this band that doesn't sound fucking brilliant. So yeah, amazing stuff. Check it out. All right, we got a couple here from Fate's Warning. Connecticut prog metal legends. Been meaning to actually get more of their stuff, and I found more of their stuff. So we have Perfect Symmetry. This is their 5th album, came out in 1989, and Inside Out, 1994. And both of these are Ray Alder era stuff, which that's the only stuff I have so far. I still need to get the John Art stuff. But so far I've really enjoyed the Ray Alder era, and that includes both of these to a degree. Now, Perfect Symmetry is the one that followed No Exit, which I really like No Exit. I think it's a little bit thrashier and more aggressive. This kind of gets a little bit more melodic, but still very progressive, like lots of lavish songwriting. Lead work is beautiful. I mean, you know, Matthias is an absolutely incredible guitarist. But the big thing that I noticed on here, outside of this is the first one where they really changed the logo, is melody has become even more prominent, and Ray Alder is really starting to settle in a bit more as their vocalist. I thought on No Exit, like, he was really pushing himself, and mostly to really awesome results, but sometimes it felt like he was trying a little bit too hard. This one, he has settled down a little bit, you know, finding a nice balance in his, you know, wide range, which works in tandem with the fact that I think the transitions are quite a bit smoother on this one than they were on No Exit, and the melodic hooks are decidedly stronger. You have some amazing lead trade-offs on the song Static X. It's not Static X, I almost said that. And I like the more gloomy vibe that shows up on A World Apart and Chasing Time. But I think my main standouts on here are At Fate's Hands and Nothing Left to Say. These are notably more proggy. In fact, they have longer instrumental jams on here and just amazing songwriting. I do think this is where they started flirting a little bit more with accessibility in terms of, like, you know, maybe taming down some of their sound and writing a single, because the Arena definitely has, well, I mean, kind of an arena rock vibe. I mean, it's not in a bad way, but this was definitely a really solid album overall. Inside Out, I like this album, but I think this is where they really stripped down their sound and kind of just went for the radio hooks. I like the production on it a little bit better. Like, it's a little bit cleaner. I think the guitars are a little bit heavier and possibly, like, tuned down a bit. And that kind of makes sense because Ray Alder also seems like he's dropping down his register and not trying to do the high-pitched wails as much, and instead just delivering melodic hooks, and it works. It works for what it is. I do think it is a little bit less proggy though. Like, these songs feel a little bit more stripped down and geared for mass consumption to a degree. That isn't to say that this is bad. I do think Shelter Me is definitely a big radio nugget, but there are some songs in here I think that are absolutely awesome and still showcases their songwriting ability. It's just sort of dialed down a bit. Like the song Monument, which kind of screams it would have been the big closer if it wasn't for the song Afterglow, which feels really tagged on. Monument is an amazing song, like super well written. I love the synth work at the end especially, but it has all the proggy flair that they are known for. And Face the Fear is a really good heavy song with like some serious urgency to it. The drum work is really fantastic on that song as well, and I like how it just transitions seamlessly into Inward Bound. Both of these are good, but for different reasons. Like, this is definitely more of Fate's Warning's older sound still, like it's still present, though you can kind of hear the shift. And this one is definitely more of a shift to a slightly more commercial sound, but again, they're doing it really well. The songs are well written, so really don't have much of an issue. If you like Fate's Warning, I mean, if you're also a big like Dream Theater fan, Queensryche, that sort of thing, check out both of these. Both still good, though I think I favor this one more than this one. Different direction here, but still well executed. Either way, probably gonna get some more Fate's Warning in the future because I'm really growing to like this band. So yeah, check them both out. First Blood. This is their self-titled debut EP, San Francisco hardcore act. I actually picked up their full-length California back in 2006. That was at a point where I was definitely picking up anything on Trustkill Records because I was like big into the metalcore and hardcore scene. I still like a lot of stuff that I picked up on Trustkill Records. That was a pretty cool label. This one came out on Division Records, and this is just straight up fucking gnarly hardcore. Pretty much Terror, but a lot of like, you know, New York hardcore as well, like Sick of It All and Madball kind of thrown in there as well. Now, 3 of these tracks actually showed up in California, so I was pretty familiar with them already. Suffocate, Victim, and Unbroken. All 3 are bangers. In fact, Suffocate was probably one of my favorites on there. But the songs that I wasn't familiar with were still really good too. Like, this is just straight ahead hardcore. Lots of breakdowns, lots of groove, lots of gang vocals. I do like the fact that Suffocate opens up with a First Blood sample, like from the fucking movie. seems pretty appropriate. The production is noticeably more raw compared to California. Like, California has some really good, just crushing production to it. This one, you know, it's still heavy, but you can definitely tell it's not mixed as well, but still, again, pretty damn good. You get some great D-beat sections that are on Victim and Unbroken, but I really like the last track, Foundation. It kind of goes more towards the punk side of hardcore. Like, a lot of this I would say is a little bit more on the metallic side, but Foundation has like a little bit more of like the punk mosher anthem to it. Like, you know, there's more punk chords in there, but of course they're played with like hardcore intensity. Pretty solid EP overall. Like, it's not very long. It's maybe about 14 minutes, and 3 of the songs I already have on California, which this made me want to go back and listen to that one. But overall, pretty solid. Like, if you just like straight ahead hardcore and just, you know, punch your buddy in the fucking face kind of music, like, this is definitely it. Again, very much in the vein of Terror, Madball. I'd even throw in Blood for Blood. Like, there's definitely some similarities to Blood for Blood overall. Just check it out. It's just nasty, violent hardcore. And check out California too. I think that one's pretty solid. I know this band has had like a lot of rotating members, and, you know, in terms of like putting out consistent releases, there's been a lot of space in between them. But I know at least the first album's pretty damn solid. So yeah, check that one out too. But yeah, First Blood, pretty good stuff. All right, we have a split here between Gluttony and Sordid Flesh. This came out in 2016 on Vic Records. I was relatively familiar with Sordid Flesh, but Gluttony I hadn't heard. But honestly, it didn't matter because both of these bands are just flat out Swedish death metal, HM2 snarling, D-beat driving Swedish death metal, and I already like that. And while there aren't many differences between the two bands, it's still a universal style that I love. Now, Gluttony features ex-members of My Own Grave, but really doesn't sound like My Own Grave. My Own Grave has like a little bit more thrash and mellow death to them. This is just straight up Entombed and Dismember worship, but really solid songs. Dead, Rotten, and Forgotten. Yeah, some of these song titles are pretty fun. Really good opening riff, very catchy, like not quite mellow death, but it has a good Swedish death metal hook to it. You get some good D-beat stompers, of course, because this is Swedish death metal. On the Slab is really good. The production on this one, as far as like the new tracks, are really good. This does have some demo tracks from their 2012 demo, and those are noticeably a bit rougher, but musically they're still really solid. These guys really don't venture too far off the reservation, but it's a reservation that I love returning to. So really not much of a complaint there. Now, both these bands pepper in one cover at the end of their side, and Gluttony's choice was Paint It Black, originally done by Rolling Stones. I mean, everyone knows Rolling Stones. It's almost unrecognizable. You can hear like the lyrics in there, but the melody is buried in just buzzsaw tone, and it's, you know, fast and aggressive. It's kind of a cool reimagining, but again, like if I hadn't been picking up on the lyrics or wasn't able to read that it was Paint It Black on the back of this album, I wouldn't have guessed it was Paint It Black. Now, Sordid Flesh features ex-members of Sorcery in it, and their style of Swedish death metal is a little bit punkier, I would say, overall. Like, you get more like those big down-picked, you know, just nasty fucking chords. The guitar tone is a little bit more raw, like there's a little bit more sizzle to it. Honestly, a lot of it reminded me of Death Breath. Like, there's that punky backbone, there's really good guitar harmonies on it, but there's that sort of like frantic vocal approach, and I think the vocals are really solid. Like, he's got great deep growls across the board on this side. But the thing that really stood out to me were the guitar harmonies, because they actually employed them quite a bit, and they added just a little peppering of melody in there, albeit like creepy, unsettling melodies, but melodies nonetheless. Now, their pick for a cover was Judas Priest's Ram It Down. I love that song. I'm not the biggest fan of the album overall, but I do love that song, and they nail it. It's pretty much a very faithful cover. Of course, you know, HM2'd the fuck up just to add some extra filth to it, but they do a really solid job on it. And honestly, I kind of prefer the drum sound on this cover to the original, because I just don't like the big canned 80s drums on that album in particular. But yeah, this was a fun split. Both these bands just delivering straight up old school Swedish death metal. It's grimy, it's filthy, it's a little bit punky and crusty too. It's pretty much just what I want. I mean, everyone on this channel knows I'm a filthy HM2 slut, and give me all that shit all the time. And yeah, of course I like this. This is a big fucking no duh. But yeah, if I haven't sold this enough, Dismember, Entombed, Bloodbath, all that fucking grimy shit, it sounds like that. definitely check it out. All right, got another pair here for you guys, this time from Flotsam and Jetsam. We have their third album, When the Storm Comes Down, and we have their sixth album, High. Both coming at points where I don't think they gave much of a fuck about album covers, but to a degree they still gave a fuck about music. After the first two Flotsam and Jetsam albums, there was a bit of a case of diminishing returns, and of course, you know, the whole changing musical landscape and them having to adapt because their first two albums are really fucking good. And then after that, it's a lot of them trying to play catch up with the times before realizing, hey, let's just get back to what we do well. And again, their most recent albums have been really fucking good. And I think When the Storm Comes Down is kind of a weird tipping point for them. Like, this is where they get a little bit more off the rails. Like, there's still a lot of thrashy riffs on here and fast songs. But I think Eric, AK, is maybe trying too hard, and he's a great vocalist. He really is. But on here, it sounds like he's just pushing to make himself sound weird, like a lot of yelped vocals in between his like soaring cleans. A lot of this kind of reminds me of like Anthrax circa Persistence of Time, though not done as well. Like, there's definitely them trying to branch out their sound, get a little bit more outside of what they did, and getting some mixed results. Like, when they're at their heaviest and thrashiest, I think they're doing really well. Like Deviation, The Master Sleep, 666, Scars, all really solid songs. Again, with some, you know, vocal flourishes that I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of, but it didn't ruin the song. But it's when they get off of that, it gets a bit weird. Like, No More Fun is kind of a weird funk metal track. Like, you have this really cool kind of almost Primus-like start. Or, I mean, maybe like Infectious Grooves, and it's this kind of strange groove metal song with like a funk backbone to it. And, I mean, it never really gels. Like, it just sounds kind of odd. And then you have Suffer the Masses, which definitely screams like a single, but it really just doesn't land the hook on it. And, I don't know, this whole album feels like, all right, let's play it safe on some songs, and then other songs, let's kind of, yeah, maybe experiment a little bit, because I hear people are getting into this whole groove metal thing. I don't know, like, this did come out in 1990, so even that seems a little kind of premature for getting on the groove metal thing, because that really kind of took off more in like 92, 93. But this is just sort of an odd album. Like, it definitely has its moments. I do think the production kind of hinders it too, because the guitars feel really thin on here. And yeah, it kind of puts Eric right out front being exposed with some of the weirder vocals he chooses, like especially on Burn Device. That one's, I don't know, a little odd when it comes down to some of the vocal things that he does on there. Now, High, their sixth album, came out in 1997, and this was definitely a time where groove metal had a pretty firm hold on metal in general, and this was not like the best year for metal. Like, you know, metal was still officially not very cool, though starting to gain some traction with like the new metal thing coming around. And looking at this, you know, of course, looking at the archives, they really didn't have much nice to say about this album. But I actually really ended up enjoying this album. Actually, to a degree, a little bit more than this one. This is definitely a groove metal album, but the riffs are really good. Eric sounds awesome on here. And I think there's some cool experimentations with like blues, maybe like a little bit of country on here, but it actually still has some thrashy barn burners on it. Hallucinational, It's On Me, Toast, really solid songs with like solid, tight thrash riffs. And this also has a couple of bonus tracks on it, which the song Surgery, the last track, I think was only released in Japan, actually is like probably the thrashiest track that, well, would have been on this original release. Now, after this one came Quattro, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but in terms of their groove metal years, I actually kind of prefer this one over Quattro. I like the guitar sound better. Eric's a little bit more in the back, but I think the extra raspiness to his vocals is really well done on here. And this one just kind of screams fun. Like, they kind of just went off the rails a little bit and actually had some fun with it. And I think the songs just gelled a lot more. And they even threw in a really cool cover of Fork Boy, originally done by Lard. Now, granted, Jello wins as far as the original one there. I love that song, but it's a really solid cover. Pretty much the entire time that I was listening to this, I actually thought of like, dude, what if like Load or Reload actually had more metal to it? This actually still sounds like a metal band, whereas Load and Reload Well, you know, it sounds like a blues rock band and with some metal moments on it. Like, this still feels like a metal band, like a metal album overall. For a shift to groove metal, I think they did a pretty solid job on this one. So yeah, I was kind of surprised because I figured I would like this one more than this one, but it actually ended up completely flipped there. But I still recommend checking out both. While this one has some issues that I have with it, I think there's some really good thrashy bangers on it. But overall, I like this one more, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, I just think the songwriting is really good, and yeah, they kind of just explore their sound and beef up the guitars and wrote a pretty solid album. Now, this was the last one with Mark Gilbert. For a while, he left after this one, and then there was a whole period without him on guitars, which he luckily returned, and I kind of signaled a whole return to form for the band. I strongly recommend their last two, especially. I think they're both excellent albums, but these are both pretty good overall. Definitely favoring this one a bit, but this one's still pretty decent. Check them both out. Flotsam and Jetsam have a really interesting discography. There's definitely a dark middle period in there, but overall, I still think they wrote some pretty solid music. So yeah, check it out. All right, next we have a couple from The Furor, even though the word "the" does not appear in their logo. This is a one-man Australian black and death metal act. This is their fourth album overall, Impending Revelation, and this is a compilation of theirs called Double Armageddon. Now, I discovered this band because the Metalhead box actually gave me a copy of Calvaries of the Occult a while ago. Jammed it, really liked it. So I saw this, you know, when I was out shopping. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna check them both out. And yeah, this is just violent, heavy, fast, aggressive black and death metal. Definitely takes good chunks from both camps. Like, it's not, you know, like favoring one over the other, but the fact that I would say it's really fucking brutal and heavy kind of gives it a little bit more of a death metal edge. It's a little bit more technical and aggressive. Like, there's a lot of like dissonant and atonal riffing, and I think there's real drums on this. I'm reasonably sure the dude plays drums as well as everything else on here. If I had to describe this one, I would say there's a good combination of like Belphegor, but with like immolation style riffs and transitions in there. Either way, it sounds dark and evil, blasty as hell, and just unhinged. Like, every song on here, I would say, explodes. You do get some, like, you know, groovier sections, kind of let the atmosphere build a bit on Inferno, Fortification, and The Pentagram Prevails, but I like the more doomy touch that is on the song Diabolic Liberation. Kind of lets the song breathe a little bit, lets you bask in all the evil atmosphere and such, but I mean, it even goes kind of fucking grindcore or death grind-ish on Corpse Eclipse. This is just a super aggressive album overall, and what it does blend is, you know, pretty much everything aggressive about all the genres. There's even some thrashy moments in here, like some really scathing thrashy leads, but I mean, the thrashiest moment, and it's for an obvious fucking reason, is the awesome cover of Slayer's Show No Mercy. I fucking love that song, and they fucking nail it, or rather he nails it because it's a one-man act. I don't know, I don't care. It's a fucking awesome cover. But yeah, solid album, very aggressive, still some melodies, some nice groovy pockets, but this is like blast beats and just aggression and evil, and I dig it. Now, this is a compilation of their two early EPs, Assault by Fire, which came out in 2008, and Summon of Slaughter, which came out in 2012, and they're both really good too. The production definitely takes a bit more of a dive. It's notably more muddy, especially on the first EP. It kind of sounds more like Blackened Morbid Angel at this point, like more along the lines of Altars of Madness, though, especially in the opening track, Supreme Righteous Mauling. It's a good song title. Now, the second EP, though, I think is really interesting because it's probably the most black metal I think I've heard this band sound. Like, it's notably more cold. I think the bass is kind of, you know, cut back in the mix. Yeah, the guitar tone is more squawky and raw. Like, it definitely has more of a black metal feel kind of overall. I think without the bass being as prominent and the guitars being as like chunky, it's less muddy and decidedly faster too. Like, it's more blast beat centric. Like, I mean, blast beats are kind of a big thing for this band in general anyway, but notably, like, every track on there is much more speedy. And in terms of like stuff that's a little bit different, the song Cult Crusher is a little bit more of like a heavy metal influence, kind of creeps its way in there. Like, I don't know if I wouldn't call it like Iron Maiden or Angel Witch or anything like that, but it's got more of like a heavy metal gallop to it. Like maybe something more akin to Celtic Frost. I don't know, like there's more riffs and melodies on there that scream classic heavy metal. But this also has like some demo tracks, I believe, from those sessions, and they're pretty good too. Man, the quality in terms of the demo is very odd. In fact, one of the tracks, like the production style changes drastically on the bridge. Like the bridge was shoehorned in, but with like different equipment. I don't know what the story was there, but it's really noticeable. Now, there are some live tracks on here, or at least one live track. I know there might be two. I can't remember, but I remember the live tracks not sounding that great just in terms of the sound quality, but in terms of, you know, the live performance, it sounded pretty damn intense, and I dug it. So yeah, overall, I dug both of these. I kind of knew I would because I liked the one album I had before. This one, I strongly recommend just because, like, it's a complete album, and this definitely captures their sound overall. But this is actually pretty cool too. I like the second demo, like the more black metal one, honestly, over, you know, the other one. You don't really hear the black metal side come out like fully on the full lengths as much as it did on the second EP or demo. I don't know, they might be demos, but I think they're listed as EPs. Either way, check them out. Really just nasty blackened death metal. I mean, Australia knows how to do fucking extreme metal exceedingly well, but yeah, check them out. Good stuff. All right, we got another pair here, this time from Garotted, which is a defunct blackened death metal act out of Massachusetts. I think they broke up sometime 2020 or 2021. We have their In the Court of Nyarlahotep demo from 2016, and their Of Damnation and Abyssal Terrors EP from 2018. And this is really solid. This was kind of a blind buy. I checked it out, said it was blackened death metal. I was like, hey, you know what, that's enough for me. They weren't super expensive, and they were shorter releases, and I figured, yeah, why not? This is a good sampler size. And, well, these guys never came out with the full length. There are EPs and demos, but I think that's about it. I think there's a compilation of all their works out there, but I'm not 100% on that. But they're both pretty solid. The demo, notably more rough, especially the mix. The vocals are really fucking loud on here, like occasionally kind of drowning out the guitars and, well, not as much the drums. But in terms of style-wise, very much along the lines of Morbid Angel. It's definitely got its blackened sections, but I think this definitely favors more death metal more than anything else. Lots of atmosphere. In fact, it opens up with a really haunting, clean melody before just getting down to some absolutely sick riffs. And with all the reverb and sort of just griminess on it, Witch Vomit was another band that kind of came to mind as far as their death metal side. I think the riff work is pretty solid. Lots of crawling, angular riffs, especially on That Which Scourged Lang and Black Spectre. Both of those songs, I don't know, a little bit more technical, like not as straightforward, like it just gets kind of creepy and dingy. But I also like that there's a lot of weird sliding and bending riffs on here, like anything to make it sound more creepy. They don't have like a lot of extra stuff they use in the way of atmosphere, like, you know, the vocals will occasionally have more reverb in sections, and you have clean moments that sort of bookend the demo, which really are cool. Like it really kind of closes the album really well and opens it up really well. But in terms of the other atmospheric bits, it's mostly in the playing, and it's pretty damn solid. I will say that some of the transitions are a bit rough on here. Like, they don't necessarily always follow, and I think the drum work on here can be a little busy at times. It just gets too busy, like, you know, like Bron Daler, like, you know, granted, awesome drummer, does a lot of cool stuff, but sometimes a little too busy, especially on the early albums. And it kind of has that vibe in spots. And, you know, a less is more approach would have been cooler. But overall, I dug the demo. Now, this EP, though, pretty much everything that I had an issue with on here is wiped away. The production's much better. The guitars are more prominent. The drum work's fantastic. I dig the fuck out of this EP. Now, in this one, the guitarist was also doing the bass work. They added a bassist on here as well as a second guitarist, Jerry Watunsky, which I looked him up, and guess what? He is in Atheist now. And I was pretty stoked to see that. Well, I'm just stoked to see that Atheist has got another lineup and they're getting ready to go out and tour with Cynic, and I'm fucking stoked for that. But yeah, seeing that pop up on here and then listening to how much more technical and melodic and just more inventive the riffs are in here, well, not only gets me excited for Atheist, but really fucking made me dig this. The riffs definitely stand out more. I would even say there's kind of a blood incantation vibe, like especially the song Pandemonium. Man, the giant fucking riffs on there are amazing, and again, kind of have that epic but sort of spacey, weird vibe that Blood Incantation has. And I would even say this is less blackened. I would say this is almost a pure death metal release. like, there's a bit of atmosphere, I guess you could say, traipses into blackened territory, but I mean, I just hear like really good atmospheric, maybe even progressive death metal, especially in the opening and closing tracks in here. Otherworldly Subversions and Into the Shivering Forest. Both of those songs just have a progressive flair in terms of like the song structure, the different dynamics they use. There's a really cool bass lead in on Crimson Thirst that just goes in this absolutely insane blast beat section. That song is notably more just straightforward aggressive, less technical, and just, I don't know, aggro as fuck. And yeah, I loved every track in this, and I'm gonna have to hunt down the other EPs and other shit this band has, because again, they broke up, and apparently they left behind a lot of killer stuff that I had never heard before. I like this demo a lot. I think it's solid. This completely blows it away, but they're both really good. If you love death metal and maybe a little bit of black metal, like, it's definitely kind of minimalized, especially on this one. Check this out. Just killer riffing. Again, Blood Incantation, Morbid Angel, maybe a little bit of Tomb Mold, Witch Vomit. Lots of fucking killer bands to compare this to. Strongly recommend this EP a little bit more than the demo, but yeah, check them both out. Just killer fucking stuff. Godthrymm, the Grand Reclamation EP. This is the debut EP from this UK epic doom metal act. We actually went over their 2020 debut album, Reflections, when it came out. I fucking love that album. Just solid doom metal in the vein of Solitude Aeternus, Candlemass. Features ex-members of My Dying Bride and Solstice, and if you mention My Dying Bride and ex-members, that's generally enough for me to actually check it out, because I love My Dying Bride. Absolutely stoked to see that they are playing MDF. That has me geeked as fuck. I mean, I was already geeked as fuck and I already had my tickets. But yeah, that's like extra fucking geekage, because that's a bucket list band like you wouldn't believe for me. Now, this actually has some tracks from Reflections on there, so there's a little bit of familiarity going in. The opening track, A Grand Reclamation, is also on there, and it is such a grand, doomy start. Lots of just slow builds, epic, raw vocals. Like, they're very throaty. They sound a lot like Robert Lowe from Solitude Aeternus, or the Robert Lowe era of Candlemass as well. The guitars are thick, sludgy, and dark sounding. I will say I like the production a lot more on Reflections. I think the drums on here sound a bit compressed. Like, they don't have the big booming sound. Like, they cut off, you know, quite a bit of the low end on them, and a bit of the high end as well. And while I really like the style of vocals, I think the fact that they constantly double the vocals, I don't know, they don't necessarily work as well. Like, I think some raw, you know, single takes on some of these vocals would probably be, I don't know, quite a bit more emotive, because the whole vibe on this is very similar to My Dying Bride, like forlorn, depressed, somber as fuck, and the vocal harmonies, or at least that doubling effect, I feel like it takes away from that a little bit. But when it comes down to just bringing the doom, though, Sacred Soil and The Pantheon are absolutely incredible songs. Sacred Soil has an absolutely pulverizing death doom breakdown. Like, you can feel every fucking ounce of happiness squashed out of your fucking body by, I don't know, like a dump truck full of cinder blocks. Like, it is just disgustingly heavy and just so dark sounding. But the drawn out slowdown of the main riff at the end of The Pantheon, that one is just great doom metal right there. Slowly just sort of like crushing your spirit with each slowdown and making each riff sound even more gloomy. I mean, it's a classic trope. It's used a lot in doom metal, but man, is it executed so well. The last track is a little tagged on, but very pretty. Forevermore is more or less just like a little acoustic number. Again, more forlorn, more dreary, except it's not like super heavy, or maybe heavy emotionally. I don't know. I thought it was good. It just felt a little tagged on, but I mean, overall, I dig this. I knew I would dig at least one of these tracks when I saw it, but the ones that I don't have on here, I think, are absolutely excellent. In fact, those were probably the big standouts, or the ones I hadn't heard. But yeah, if you like your doom epic and bleak as fuck, which, I mean, if you like doom metal, you kind of have to like bleak. That's kind of a prerequisite there. Definitely check this out. Check out their full-length Reflections. I think that is an absolutely amazing album. Kind of an underrated full-length, too. I don't think a lot of people got a chance to check that one out. We reviewed it back when we really didn't have a lot of subscribers, so I don't know if a lot of people saw that one. But yeah, check out the full length and check this one out as well. Just killer epic doom. Grip Incorporated, Power of Inner Strength. This is the debut full length from, well, that's an LA-based groove metal act, but it's mostly well known because this is what Dave Lombardo went to after leaving Slayer in, I believe it was 93 or 94. I can't remember exactly, but I mean, Dave Lombardo's had kind of a rocky history with that band, and I love Dave Lombardo. I think he's still one of the best fucking drummers out there in metal, and I think in general, like, he's just a solid fucking drummer, period. But last year, I actually picked up their sophomore album, Nemesis, down there, and I came across the debut, and I was like, well, yeah, I gotta check this one out. And honestly, this is my favorite one that I've heard so far. This one actually still has like some thrashy bite. Nemesis was a little bit more straightforward groove metal. Songs like Hostage to Heaven, Guilty of Innocence, and Colors of Death both have like distinctly thrashy moments, great chuggy riffs all over the place. In fact, there's a lot of cool syncopation on here that kind of reminds me of Fear Factory, albeit like a little bit more groovy and vocally a lot different. The vocals on here are kind of just like a straightforward kind of like hardcore gruff singing voice. Gus Chambers definitely had a more hardcore delivery overall. Like, it feels more connected to like the hardcore side of extreme metal versus like actual metal. He does throw in some interesting spoken word sections on Monster, Among Us, and Longest Hate. Definitely adds to the atmosphere. But what I really like in here is the music overall. Like, this is really awesome groove metal. It doesn't kind of stay in like one gear where it's just kind of dry humping a 4/4 time groove. There's really cool syncopation here. I mean, you have Dave Lombardo on drums. There's going to be cool drums, at least there should be. There's some cool tribal drum breaks. I mean, the opening track, Toque de Muerto, I don't know if I even said that right, is a cool layered tribal drum pattern that builds into the first song, Savage Seas Retribution, which is fucking killer. Again, kind of like Fear Factory-ish on that. But Innate Affliction actually kind of goes more towards like Helmet, but it has a cool tribal break in that one as well. I mean, any chance for Dave to show off on drums, you kind of just let him. And Heretic War Chant actually has a bit of like a bolt thrower sort of groove to it that I really dug. The only song I really didn't care for on here was Ostracized, which felt a little basic compared to everything else. Like, that felt like the safe radio nugget, but this is 1995, and unfortunately the radio was thoroughly ignoring anything metal at that point, unless it was Pantera. So naturally this one pretty much got ignored, but at least the longtime Slayer fans probably heard about this, like, oh, that's where Dave went, I'll check it out. At least in theory, because I wasn't that person. I was still following Slayer at that point, and I kind of let Grip Incorporated slide under the radar. But here I am actually talking about them, and I really dig this album. I know they have two other ones, and then sadly they broke up, or at least went defunct. Gus Chambers, again, sadly passed a few years ago, I believe. I think it was somewhere in the 2010s. So honestly, I don't think this band is probably going to continue, but I would like to get their other two albums. I think the other two albums seem like they're pretty fairly well received as well. So yeah, if you have never checked this out, and maybe you got like kind of a thing about like, I don't know about groove metal. I mean, I kind of get it. There's a lot of groove metal duds out there. This is not one of them. This is really solid groove metal, still a bit of thrash to it. Just really solid songwriting kind of in metal in general. So yeah, definitely check it out. All right, so the next three are by the same band, and that band is Genesis. We are getting into some non-metal here. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard me gush about Phil Collins. Well, this is the start of the trio era here with And Then There Were Three, because Peter Gabriel left, and there were three of them left. I'm sure the album title is much more clever than I explained it right there, but I guess that kind of works in terms of an explanation. But this is the beginning of the trio, and Phil Collins taking over on lead vocals, as well as still doing drums in here. And this is really, really fucking good. This is definitely still in their prog era. They're really not going for the big hits that they would be known for later. Duke would follow this, and that would start to usher in like the more straightforward, just rock and sort of pop hooks, but it would still mix in a lot of the proggy elements. These are more lavish prog songs with giant builds and lush synths. In fact, I think this is one of the last ones where Mike Rutherford is really prominent on guitars, because a lot of the guitars kind of got broken up more. Like definitely contributing to the melody. But in terms of like the focus of the songs, I feel like they became more synth driven and more vocally driven because Phil Collins has such a fucking killer voice. Phil sounds a little bit different on here. He's more reserved. I don't think he's like fully comfortable, you know, in terms of being the vocalist yet. Like, he's doing a great job, definitely embracing it. But compared to later releases, he feels way more reserved. But that might also be because this is more of a 70s album, doesn't have the 80s lush production that would come later. So, you know, kind of a different approach here. But what Phil absolutely does rule on are drums. The drum work on here is absolutely fantastic. The opening track, Down and Out, is amazing. Ballad of Big, I wouldn't even call it a ballad. Like, it's kind of a fucking rocker, and Jesus, man, it's got some killer fucking hooks on it. The album is wide-ranging for damn sure. Like, there are lots of big prog rock hooks, like, you know, again, kind of comparable to like Yes and, you know, King Crimson, I guess, but also a lot of lush acoustic play. Mike's acoustic guitar work in here, I think, is really, really pretty. But overall, I love the big proggy anthems. Burning Rope, I think, is just a huge song. I absolutely love it. But Deep in the Motherlode, that one with its more pulsating bass sense on there, that's almost sort of a foretelling of things to come because Tony Banks, I mean, he's a fantastic synth player. He's just absolutely amazing. But him kind of taking over on that song a little bit more and it having a little bit more of what you would associate with like an 80s sound versus a 70s sound, because a lot of this is very 70s style synthesizers. They're very warm, like very moogie. It's a dumb way of saying that, but yeah, like Moog synthesizers, like it has that vibe. Moogie? What the fuck is wrong with me? But this would also spawn like kind of a big hit too with Follow You, Follow Me. It's notably a more straightforward jam. It's just kind of built around a hook. And I think because that song gained a fair amount of traction, that's kind of the direction they were going to push on the next one. And I mean, Duke is kind of one of my favorites in terms of the Phil Collins stuff. I still need to get the Peter Gabriel era stuff. I haven't got around to that yet, but almost done with the Phil Collins era. But yeah, this was absolutely fantastic. A great listen. This is just classic sounding prog. Great songwriting. Very different from the stuff that would come later, but I think this is definitely a standout in their discography overall. So yeah, definitely check this one out. Then we have Abacab, their 11th studio album overall. This is definitely the big shift to the more adult contemporary pop sort of sound they had. I love this album. I'm a huge fan of the title track. I jam that one all the time. It's one of my favorite Genesis tracks. And overall, this album is really solid. Like, Keep It Dark is fantastic. Man on the Corner is such a damn good song, like it or not. Dodo the Lurker is probably the lone more proggy one, but this is kind of proggy in a different sense. Like, a lot of this is more minimalist. I mean, look at the album cover. Obviously, album art was, again, more minimalist, but this is kind of where I would say Phil and Tony Banks kind of take over. The synths are probably the most prominent thing. In fact, I think they drive the songs as much as Phil Collins' vocals. Mike is doing some really cool stuff, but again, the guitars on here are a little bit minimal, a little bit more spaced out, like almost sort of like looped melodies for the most part, like especially on the title track, but it's still really good. And me being a big 80s fan, growing up in this era, this is just an awesome reminder of how cool the music was back then. I'm a big sucker for 80s pop, mainly because I think a lot of really good musicians were behind it, and Genesis did a really good job transitioning to it. The production here, notably more clean. You know, there's more electronic drums on it now. Like, electronic drums were kind of flirted with on Duke, but this, I think a good chunk of them were done on an electronic set. And again, more minimalist. There's not a lot of like wild fills or big proggy moments in here. Even on Dodo Lurker, it's prog, but it's prog in the song structure. It's not as like lavish in terms of the musicianship. It's probably the most like instrumentally driven song rather than being, you know, driven by like a big hook than any other song on the album. But it's, again, like notably different than anything they'd done before in terms of like a proggier song. Like, there's definitely more prog on Duke than there is on this, but what they did in terms of stripping it down and just going for catchy songs, they did a fucking great job. The only song I have trouble getting into is probably Who Done It. It's just kind of an odd song, like probably the most 80s sounding one on it, just in terms of like the canned drums, the weird vocals, and I don't know. It's an odd song. It's still catchy, but It doesn't grab me like the rest of it, but yeah, I love this album. I mean, I've been very familiar with a lot of these songs on here, like, again, Keep It Dark, No Reply at All, great fucking song. I love the horn section on it. Very catchy stuff. Of course, the title track and Man on the Corner is an absolutely fantastic song too. But the songs I'm less familiar with on here, I definitely enjoyed as well. So yeah, this is just a killer album, but like not really comparable to a lot of the stuff in the earlier catalog, which again, eventually I'm going to get some of the earlier stuff with Peter Gabriel, which I was looking for down there, but honestly, I just came across the Phil Collins stuff and I was like, ooh, cool, I'm just going to get this because I wanted it anyway. But yeah, killer album, very different, and it would continue to evolve from here, but yeah, I really dig this one. And then the last one I picked up by Genesis was their self-titled one from 1983, their 12th album overall, and this one is definitely a bigger shift towards the poppier stuff. And it's really well done, though. I mean, That's All is a killer song, and it definitely has a more commercial feel overall. They definitely hit, you know, a certain stride with Abacab and having some big singles in there, so they wanted to kind of push that, and I get it. There are some more proggy moments, like Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea are more instrumentally driven, and I think have a little bit more like a progressive song structure, but a lot of these songs kind of just, you know, go for the big hook. Just a Job to Do is a nice high energy rocker. I like that it is a little bit more guitar driven. Again, like kind of the guitar stuff became a little bit more minimal on, you know, the later stuff. It was a little bit more synth and vocal driven, which I have no issues with that because you have Tony Banks on synths and Phil Collins on vocals. I'm totally fine with that. But the song Mama, the opening track, is probably one of their darkest sounding songs. I've been a huge fan of that song just because it was kind of weird even when I was growing up, especially when Phil Collins was making the weird laughing and noises. I honestly think David Draymond from Disturbed built his entire fucking personality off of those two moments. I think he took it way too far and kept repeating the fucking weird noises, and that just became his shtick. But yeah, outside of both of them being bald, those are the only similarities I can think of, because yeah, Phil Collins rules and David Draymond's kind of a douchebag. But yeah, I dig this one, except for maybe one track in here, Illegal Alien. I know that was a single. I remember the music video and listening to it again. Yeah, that one hasn't aged very well, like at all. Like, I know the intention behind it was probably to be fun and loose and not to be openly racist or xenophobic, but it kind of comes off that way now. Maybe more insensitive than malicious. I mean, you know, I don't think they really thought about that one as like, yeah, let's go after, I don't know, the Mexicans. That seems like that's what they were going for in the music video. But yeah, it doesn't look good now. Yeah, it's just sort of a, you know, fluffy fucking pop track, and Phil singing in this very cringy fucking accent. Yeah, hasn't aged well. Probably my least favorite track on here, because everything else in here I really dig. Again, you know, this is way more of a pop shift here. Like, this is at the point where you could really call Genesis a pop band, and that would definitely continue on with the next album, Invisible Touch, which I didn't pick up. I don't dislike that one, but at that point, the Phil Collins albums and that one really start blending together, and they kind of blend together a bit here, but there's still some stuff in here that is just flat out Genesis. So yeah, good album, notably more commercial, one really cringy song, but still overall a pretty good one. I think out of the bunch, and then there were three, and Abacab were definitely the favorites for different reasons. Like, I love both of those albums for completely different reasons and different sounds in there. But yeah, good album, check it out. And finally, we have Geezer, Plastic Planet, the debut album from Geezer Butler's eponymous project, I guess. I mean, this is when he was still using the slashes in there, like it was later called Geezer, because the only other album I own by Geezer is Black Science, and I didn't like it very much. It's just sort of industrial groove metal, and it's kind of just okay. But I knew about the track The Invisible from the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, and I was like, yeah, you know what, maybe I'll just pick up this one. Maybe this is the better one. It's got Burton Bell on vocals. You know, I love Fear Factory. Let's check it out. And musically, I mean, it's pretty solid. It's really heavy groove metal. Like, the guitars in here are chunky as hell, and the drums sound punchy as fuck. The bass is nice and prominent. But the songs overall are kind of dull and repetitive. And I like Burton Bell in Fear Factory, and honestly, outside of Fear Factory, not much else, and that includes this. He's just got a very flat vocal delivery, and this is him doing more, I guess, singing or like tuneful groaning, more or less. When he's growling his guts out in Fear Factory, I think he sounds great. Like, Demanufacture's still up there with one of my favorite albums ever. One of the best albums of the 90s, easily, for me. But here, it sounds like he's doing a long, drawn-out Danzig impression, and, like, not the good kind of Danzig impression, like later Danzig, like the Elvis covers Danzig. I'm sure that covers album has its fans. I wasn't a fan of the one before that either. Glenn sounds pretty terrible these days, and Burton kind of sounds close to that on here. There's some cool thrashy moments on House of Clouds and Detective 27. Man, Giving Up the Ghost has a really bad chorus on it. It's really hard to get past. And the last track, Cycle of 60, is just strange. I don't know, like that song never really comes together for me. It's just odd. But honestly, there's like a lot of like weird stuff that's peppered in. Like, there's a weird sample on Seance Fiction where it sounds like they kind of just looped cat noises, and I don't know why. Like, it doesn't add anything to the song. The most it adds is you going, huh, that was a weird noise. Oh, there it is again. That's about it. You know, there's just some odd choices on here, like some industrial bits that are kind of peppered in there, which, you know, Black Science was notably more industrial. But yeah, this was kind of a letdown. Like, I had never actually jammed this entire album. I saw it in a used bin. It was like $3. I was like, you know, fuck it, why not? Let's get it. And yeah, it was really lower mid. The Invisible is a decent track. There are some other decent tracks in here, but a lot of this just doesn't seem to gel entirely. I think the production on here is really good. I love the guitar tone, drums, all that shit. But yeah, Burton's vocals aren't great on here, and again, like, just some weird songwriting. But I still urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. You may really dig this one. I mean, it's been out for fucking forever. I think this came out in, what, 95? Yeah, 95. Yeah, it's been out forever. So, I mean, check it out, form your own opinions. Fear Factory is way fucking better, but I don't know. You might dig it, so check it out. All right, that knocks out another chunk of Florida, and I'm going to get right to work on the next one because I'm trying to get through this because I still got a lot of Denver shit to go through. And yeah, there's a lot of killer stuff in there. I think that one's a little bit more metal-centric entirely. This Florida run is definitely going to have some more interesting surprises along the way, but of course it's still going to be loaded with metal because, yeah, fucking metal rules. Either way, tons of stuff coming. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is in there, as well as our store, which we will be eventually loading up on stuff. We have some cool design ideas, and we're eventually going to start getting those out, and we will let you know once we have some stuff in that store for damn sure. We also have a giveaway going on for when we eventually hit 15,000 subscribers, which we are less than 300 away from that right now. All you have to do is comment on the video link down below, and you are entered. I'm giving away 10 CDs. There's lots of cool shit in there, and I need to find those CDs a happy home, you know, with some rabid metalhead that's going to jam the living fuck out of them, and that person could be you. All you have to do, again, is comment on the video link down below. It's also playing automatically on our channel as soon as you get there. So yeah, if you have yet to comment on that video, get on there and comment, and you are entered. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It means the fucking world to us. I know we say this every time because, oh, it's the thank you part of the video, but yeah, no, we're fucking sincere. Like, without you guys, this channel would not have grown to where it's at and wouldn't continue to grow. Metalheads are a fucking passionate fan base, and I love it. Even, you know, when we disagree, because we're gonna disagree on some shit. I mean, we already have disagreed on a lot of shit, but, you know, it's awesome that we can actually have, like, cool discourse in the comments and shit like that. It means the fucking world to us. So thank you all once again. You all fucking rule, and we will catch you later.